there are a lot of architectural oddities that remain a mystery as to why they're here.
October 2016. A preservation team breaks through a wall that had been sealed since 1906 and finds a room nobody had entered in over a century, sitting exactly as it was left the day the earthquake hit. That room was only the beginning. A glass mystery solved after 90 years by an envelope falling out of a wall. A chamber with one way in and 3 ways to vanish. And a number that stops looking like superstition the longer you stare at it. This is the Winchester Mystery House, where a staircase climbs into a solid ceiling and a door swings open onto a 12-foot drop into thin air. All of it built by one woman over 38 years, with no blueprint and no architect. Just her, deciding what got built and what got sealed away. Let's dig into this house together.
But there are a lot of architectural oddities that remain a mystery as to why they're here.
Walk up to the Winchester Mystery House and something is wrong before you even reach the door. The front door does not line up with the roof peak above it. It sits slightly off to the right. A small thing, easy to miss, and a warning about everything waiting inside. Because inside, the house stops obeying rules. One of the 40 staircases climbs straight up and dead ends against the ceiling. No landing, no door, nothing. Cabinets open onto solid walls. Doors swing wide to reveal flat brick. There are windows built into the floors, so light rises up through your feet from the room below. There are columns installed upside down. There is a linen closet the size of an apartment standing next to a cabinet less than an inch deep. Then there are the ones that would kill you. A door on an upper floor opens onto a 12-foot plunge into open air, which the tour guides now cheerfully call the mother-in-law suite. Another door, if you stepped through it, would drop you straight into a kitchen sink 1 floor below. Balconies face inward, staring into interior rooms instead of out at the orchards. Windows sit at waist height for no reason anyone can name. The easy explanation, the one repeated for 100 years, is that the woman who built it had simply lost her mind. But that explanation has a problem, and the problem is that the same house is full of engineering ahead of its time. Indoor plumbing, forced air heating, advanced gas lighting, structural solutions that modern engineers have examined and admired. Madness does not usually come with working central heat. So, which was she? A woman unraveling, or a woman building something nobody understood? To answer that, you have to start with what happened to her before she ever laid a single board. Sarah Lockwood Pardee was born in 1839 in New Haven, Connecticut, into money and standing. And she got an education almost no woman of her era received. She studied mathematics, physics, architecture. Remember that, because it matters later. In 1862, she married William Wirt Winchester, whose father Oliver had built the company behind the most famous repeating rifle in American history. By every account, the marriage was a happy one. Then the deaths started. In 1866, Sarah gave birth to a daughter, Annie Pardee Winchester. The baby lived 40 days before a wasting disease took her. Then, in 1881, tuberculosis killed William at 43. In roughly that same stretch, Sarah also buried her mother and her father-in-law, a husband, a child, and both of the people who anchored her, gone. What she inherited was staggering, around $20 million, worth well over $500 million today, plus nearly half ownership of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. She was one of the wealthiest women in America, and she was completely alone. And this is where the legend takes over. The story says Sarah went to a medium in Boston who told her the spirits of every person ever killed by a Winchester rifle were coming for her, that they had already taken her husband and her daughter, and that her only escape was to travel west and build a house, and never, ever stop building. Stop the hammers, and the spirits find you. It is one of the greatest ghost stories America ever produced. Hold on to it, because everything you are about to see was built by a woman under that curse, or so we were told. In 1885, Sarah Winchester came to California. The next year, she bought a modest 8-room farmhouse out in the Santa Clara Valley and named it Llanada Villa, Spanish for house on flat land, and nobody knows why she chose it. She started building almost immediately, and she did not stop for 38 years. Within months, she had added more than a dozen rooms. Then more. She employed 16 carpenters working in rotating shifts around the clock, paying them 3 times the going wage to guarantee the work never paused. Day and night, for decades, that valley heard hammers. One observer described the house as being in a constant state of becoming, and she designed all of it herself, with no formal training as an architect. She sketched her ideas on whatever was in front of her, napkins, scraps of brown paper, and handed them to her carpenters. Sometimes a room went up and was plastered over the following day. Sometimes a staircase ran into a ceiling because she changed her mind halfway through. In 1911, the San Jose Mercury News looked at the thing rising out of the orchards and called it a great question mark in a sea of apricot and olive trees. More than a century later, the San Francisco Chronicle was still baffled, describing it as an ornately complex answer to a very simple question. Why? When the hammers finally went silent on the day she died in 1922, they left behind roughly 160 rooms, 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 47 fireplaces, 40 staircases, 13 bathrooms, 6 kitchens, 3 elevators, 2 basements. But here is the thing about a house that big, built that fast, by a woman who kept changing her mind. Nobody, including her, could possibly remember all of it. Some of those rooms got closed up, and some of them stayed closed for over 100 years. Go back to 1906. At just past 5 in the morning, the San Francisco earthquake hits, around 7.9, and it tears into the Winchester House, 60 miles south. 3 of the 7 stories come down, damage everywhere, and Sarah is trapped. She was reportedly caught inside an upstairs room for hours before anyone got to her. When she got out, she blamed the whole disaster on evil spirits, and she made a decision. That room got boarded up. She never set foot in it again, and then the years of construction swallowed it, and everyone forgot it was there. For 110 years, nobody opened it. Then, in October of 2016, a preservation team working in the attic broke through, and what they found was a time capsule, a pump organ, a Victorian couch, a dress form, a sewing machine, paintings, all of it sitting exactly as Sarah left it on the morning the earth moved. They named it the Daisy Room, after the daisy pattern in its glass, and it brought the total known room count in the mansion to 161. That number, by the way, keeps climbing, because this was not even the first forgotten room they had found. Back in 1975, construction crews cut into a wall and found themselves staring into a space no living person knew existed. 2 chairs sat inside, an early 20th century speaker, the kind that fits into an old phonograph, and a door that had been locked since 1910. Sarah had simply built over it in the frenzy and forgotten it completely. Then, in 2015, a new general manager named Walter Magnuson arrived and started noticing things. Doors that stayed locked, hallways that stayed dark. When he asked, he was told those spaces opened only with skeleton keys, and exactly 1 tour guide had access. Magnuson kept asking. In his words, he just wanted to know what these places were. So he went snooping, and he started finding room after incredible room the public had never seen. Some had missing floorboards. Some had been sealed after the earthquake and left to rot. Some were full of broken tile, and some were beautiful in ways that stopped him. Wallpaper that scattered sunlight across the room in tiny glowing orbs. Rows of stained glass mounted at waist height. Hidden balconies looking out over that impossible gabled roof. It took 10 months of work. In May of 2017, 40 of those hidden spaces opened to the public for the first time. The tour included the mansion's front door, which was barely used even in Sarah's lifetime. And there is a legend that Theodore Roosevelt himself once came to visit during his presidency and was turned away at that door because Sarah was not home. It included the crystal bedroom, named for the mica glittering in its wallpaper, and it included a storage space in the north wing where the windows and railings from the collapsed 7th floor tower still sit. Wreckage from 1906 kept. But the strangest room they opened is round. It is called the South Turret Witch's Cap, and it is the only circular room in the entire house. Its peaked roof does something acoustically bizarre. Stand in the right spot inside it, and your own voice comes back at you from every direction at once. A surround sound effect out of a building constructed a century before anybody engineered such a thing. And this is the room where Harry Houdini held a séance in 1924. Think about who that is. Houdini was the most famous debunker of the supernatural on Earth, a man touring the country to expose spirit mediums as frauds and con artists. 2 years after Sarah's death, he walked into her house, into the round room with the impossible acoustics, and conducted a séance. And according to some accounts, it was Houdini who told the new owners what to call the place: the Winchester Mystery House. The greatest skeptic alive handed this house its name, and the name stuck for 100 years. So the rooms were giving up their secrets. But the house still had a riddle nobody had cracked in 90 years, and it was hiding in plain sight, in the glass.
Winchester Mystery House is an incredibly unique Victorian mansion created by Sarah Winchester, heiress to the Winchester repeating arms.
Sarah's stained glass windows are extraordinary, and for over 90 years, nobody could say who made them. The comfortable assumption was Tiffany of New York. Sarah was an East Coast woman with a fortune, so of course she bought the best. But there was never a shred of proof, and worse, the windows did not look like Tiffany's work at all. As house historian Janan Boema put it, Tiffany did pictorial windows and used a lot of opalescent glass and not much beveled glass. Sarah's windows were the opposite. Whoever made them, Boema said, was very clearly at the top of their trade. But who? The answer came from 1,000 miles north. On Vancouver Island in British Columbia sits Craigdarroch Castle, once home to the coal baron Robert Dunsmuir, and the caretakers there had exactly the same problem: a magnificent collection of stained glass of unknown origin. Except they had one clue. A single window in Craigdarroch, worked in a distinctive daisy pattern, was so close to a set of windows inside Sarah Winchester's house that it was obvious both had come from the same studio. An architectural historian named Jim Wolfe took the case. He knew the two houses had been decorated at almost the same moment, and that Dunsmuir had heavy business ties to San Francisco. He tracked the trail to a forgotten name, John Mallon and his Pacific Glass Company of San Francisco, once the premier glass studio on the West Coast, winning awards as far away as Paris, supplying the Mark Hopkins Mansion on Nob Hill, the Carson Mansion, the Villa Montezuma. In April of 2019, Wolfe came to the Winchester House and laid out his case. The staff believed him. But belief is not proof, and after 90 years, proof is exactly what nobody had. The very next day, it fell out of a wall. A team of restorers was working on one of the oldest rooms in the mansion, pulling away a section of lath and plaster wall, and something came loose behind it and drifted to the floor. It was an envelope, filthy, dust-caked, and remarkably well preserved. It was addressed to Sarah Winchester. On its face was a picture of an elaborate stained glass window and a company logo, and it carried a postmark, July 20th, 1894. The logo read, Pacific American Decorative Company of San Francisco. One phone call to Jim Wolfe confirmed it. Mallon's Pacific Glass Company had been reincorporated in 1893 under exactly that name. The envelope itself was empty. It had been opened over a century earlier, its letter long gone. But that postmark answered a question that had stood for 90 years, and it did it one day after the historian who solved it walked out the door. A house that spent a century keeping its secrets chose that particular week to let one go. Which brings us to the room at the center of everything, and the number carved through this house like a signature. Deep inside the mansion is a small chamber with blue walls, roughly 6 feet by 8. This is the séance room. The legend says Sarah came here every night to speak with the dead, to receive her instructions, to learn what the spirits wanted built next. And the room is genuinely unnerving. There is one entrance. Sarah held the only key, but there are 3 ways out. One door opens onto the drop that lands you in the kitchen sink, a floor below. Another, seen from the dressing room on its far side, does not look like a door at all. It looks like a blank paneled wall. Inside, a cabinet holds 13 hooks, and a stained glass window shows a spider web. Now start counting 13s, and you cannot stop. There are 13 bathrooms in the house, and the 13th bathroom has 13 windows, and it takes 13 steps to reach it. Ceilings are framed in 13 panels, including the entrance hallway. One staircase breaks into 7 steps, then 11 again. The grand ballroom chandelier was built with 13 gas jets. A window she designed holds 13 blue and amber stones. Many staircases have 13 steps. Many windows have 13 panes. And when Sarah Winchester signed her will, she signed it 13 times, and she divided it into 13 parts. For 100 years, this was offered as the final proof. A woman drowning in superstition, obsessed with an unlucky number, building a maze to hide from vengeful ghosts. Except there is another reading of it, and once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. Sarah studied mathematics. She was running the single most complicated private construction project in America for 38 years, with no computers, no project software, no blueprints, and 16 men building around-the-clock off sketches on napkins. What if 13 was not a superstition? What if it was a system, a signature, a tag, a way of marking and tracking her own work through a structure so vast that no human memory could hold it? And if that is true, then the entire ghost story starts to fall apart, which, as it turns out, is exactly what historians found when they went looking for it. Here is what happened when researchers tried to verify the legend. They went looking for the medium, the Boston séance, the warning about the rifle spirits. They found nothing. No letters, no records, nothing written down anywhere while Sarah Winchester was alive. The story does not appear until after her death, when the house was being marketed to ticket-buying tourists who needed a better reason to come than an empty farmhouse in an orchard. The earliest seed of it seems to be an 1895 newspaper article, which claimed only that Sarah believed she would die when the house was finished, and therefore kept building. That is a different superstition entirely. And notably, that early account never mentions ghosts, never mentions rifles, and never mentions guilt. And the guilt is the part historian Janon Boehm rejects most flatly. People in that era, she told the Los Angeles Times, did not carry the enormous moral weight about guns that people carry now. They were a useful tool, something people needed. Sarah Winchester was not hiding from the dead of the American frontier, because it does not appear to have occurred to anyone at the time that she should. So why did she live like a recluse? Boehm's answer is heartbreakingly mundane. Sarah had severe arthritis in her hands and poor dental health, physical conditions that made being seen in public painful and embarrassing. And the maze, the staircase into the ceiling, the door to nowhere, the balcony facing inward, not spirit traps, earthquake damage, half-finished remodels she moved on from, and the honest mistakes of a brilliant woman who had studied architecture but never practiced it, and who had enough money to make mistakes for 38 straight years without ever having to live with the consequences. What the records actually describe is a generous employer and a committed philanthropist, a shrewd manager of an enormous fortune who probably bought that farmhouse with expansion in mind because she could afford to build a home big enough for her whole extended family. The madwoman was invented. The house is real. So what do we do with the fact that people who work there are still seeing things? Because they are. In 2024, the executive director Walter Magnuson, the same man who went snooping through the locked hallways, reported windows slamming shut during meetings, doors opening on their own, and voices coming from empty rooms. Visitors on the 2023 tours described shadowy figures. People report footsteps echoing down corridors with nobody in them, and the sound of breathing that has no source. Every guide in the house has a story. Jamie Foster, one of them, was cleaning cobwebs out of the witch's cap, that round room with the strange acoustics, singing quietly to herself. She felt two arms wrap around her from behind. She assumed a friend was playing a joke, and she turned around. There was nobody there. Make of that what you will. The house has been generating stories for a century, and a century of expectation does powerful things to human perception, especially in a round room engineered to throw your own voice back at you from every direction. Sarah Winchester died on the 5th of September, 1922, at 83 years old. The Hammers stopped that same day. Within a year, the house opened to the public, sold to the world as the work of a madwoman running from ghosts, and it worked so well that we are still repeating it 100 years later. But nobody was ever chasing her. The medium was never real. What was real was a woman who lost her daughter, her husband, her mother, and her father-in-law, who inherited a fortune built on a rifle, and who spent the next 38 years building the one thing that would never be finished, and therefore could never be taken from her. Every wall they open answers one question and raises three more. A room sealed for a century. An envelope that waited 90 years to fall. 40 spaces nobody remembered. And the house is not finished giving them up. If you want to keep digging into mysteries like this, subscribe, because this house still isn't done talking.